I'm Jenny Bunn. I'm the Programme Director on the MA in Archives and Records Management, which is located in the Department of Information Studies in University College London. What I do is I teach on that course, I kind of coordinate that course, but I also do a little bit of research around that. I'm quite interested at the moment in the history of automation within archives, looking at how archives started to use computers from the sort of 60s and 70s onwards. So that's what I'm looking at the moment. I'm an archivist, so I always think about the sort of how things are going to be looked after. I think I have difficulty with the term data because I don't really apply data to my work, to what I collect. And it's a question of, what do I feel I've actually created? What have I produced as a result of my research? Most of my research is based around interviewing, I guess. So if I'm creating anything as a new artifact, I guess it's interviews. So it'll be audio recordings of interviews and then the transcriptions of those interviews. So this is kind of what I see perhaps as the nearest I can come to for data. You're thinking about this as something that is a shared artifact. You're creating it with somebody else, with your interviewee. So even in terms of consent, you're thinking about, do they want it shared? Do they want to be anonymous? Do they, how are you going to treat their data? And you have to have a contract with that individual about what you're creating. And I have started to put in a question on that kind of consent form that says, when this project is finished, would you be happy for your interview to be placed somewhere? And so I think it's difficult because I think with data, quite often you kind of feel that it's just something that you create, that you can have ownership over, that you can decide what to do with, that's yours. And I believe that when I'm doing these interviews, it's not mine, it's not something that I own particularly, it's something that I've created with some other people. As soon as you talk about sharing, as soon as you talk about making it available, the question is why? The question is what value has it got? And this is sort of difficult sometimes to answer. I don't believe in making stuff available for the sake of making stuff available. It's just gonna, it takes, as an archivist, I know how much effort is involved in looking after material and in making it available. It's quite labour intensive. If you're going to do it properly, if you're going to look after the stuff, if you're going to make it available and you're going to kind of make it available in a responsible way, there's a lot of effort. So I kind of have difficulties seeing the kind of value proposition. I will do it if I see there's a point to it. And it's sort of that ongoing value that I have difficulty with. So with the terms of interviews, which is what I tend to see as my data, it's like, I believe there is value in these kind of statements, but it's where would you put that and how, where does the value come out best? My issues with storing data are around just the sort of ethical issues around it, and also the kind of, being quite serious about thinking about why I need to keep it. And I mean, this is the other thing, people quite often think archivists are all about keeping data, but we're actually to some extent around getting rid of data. And people just leave stuff lying around, and because it's so easy to store data, they just leave it on the computer or they leave it there. And I think there is a question about actually, is it actually more responsible to get rid of data? Is there a point at which you need to get rid of the data? I think what would be more useful perhaps is training that actually gets to these kind of trickier ethical sort of integrity of your research questions. So questions around, just even having that conversation about what do you think is your data? What have you created? Where do you think the value of that is? And stepping outside your research project is very difficult, and lots of, I'm as guilty of this as everybody. You get blinded by your research project, that's all you're focusing on. But the ability to have someone perhaps external to your project come in and sort of give you that kind of alternative perspective and actually ask you the question about, where do you think the value of this is? Where would this be best placed? Not just why are you keeping it, because the funders say I have to keep it for 20 years. Why? Where would it be best used? Can you see any reuse value in it? How are we going to sort of build on that? So I think it's that kind of critical external perspective to prompt me to ask some of the questions that perhaps I kind of get blinded to a little bit because I'm just sort of stuck in my research project and all I'm looking at is the final paper or whatever it is. So I've had people come to talk to me about it because I'm an archivist, so they kind of come and speak to me about research data management, and they say we want to preserve our website, and I'm going, well, why? You know, and what's it for? And can't you break it down? So you've created this web resource as part of your research project, but where's the value? Where's the real value? What have you done? And what is actually the best format in which to keep it? So particularly this website, they've done a lot of geotagging of resources around buildings in a particular London borough. And so the question is, okay, you've got a geotagged data set. Now that I can see as having value. Maybe that's what you need to keep. And they collected sort of individual user contributions around these places. And again, you can see some value. That's something new that wasn't there before. You've got these new stories. But where's the best place for those stories? Do they necessarily need to be in this, resource? Or can you extract them somehow and keep them maybe at the local borough archive or give them to them? And there's the value will then, that's the place that people are going to go for that sort of material. So it's kind of more accessible. So I think it's thinking beyond research and thinking beyond the life of your project, and also the kind of institutional repository. There may be other places where your data, or whatever it is that you want to see as your data, might have more value. It might be more obviously found, and it might actually really contribute to something rather than just being a dump. What an archive is a long-term commitment to something. It's a long-term commitment to whatever it is you've created. And I think that's why I see research data management not as something separate. I see it very much as something that's sort of about research integrity and around research ethics. So you have a duty, you're spending all this money, you're spending all this time creating something, and you have to kind of give due to that, and you have to look after it properly. And that doesn't mean just putting it in a repository and forgetting about it and moving on to the next thing necessarily. It means thinking about the best place to put it, and that's not always the institutional repository, the best way to frame it, how it might be the most useful to somebody else.